Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I actually reviewed Klara and the Sun recently. I very much consider Never Let Me Go a companion novel to um, Klara and the Sun. I'll put a link to my Klara and the Sun review in the description as well as a card. Why is it a companion piece? Well, it's a companion piece in the sense of all Ishiguro novels are related to each other. We're talking about memory, love, human relationships. So there's that level. But here I think it's the issue of a complicated moral issue that our society really hasn't figured out yet, in part because our society doesn't agree on basic moral principles. But if you're hoping for a spoiler-free review, I'm about to reveal a major plot point, so you might want to pause and finish reading the book before I continue. But Klara and the Sun is talking about artificial intelligence, and Never Let Me Go is talking about human cloning. The story revolves around Tommy, Ruth, and Kathy. They're three children at a boarding school called Hailsham. This boarding school is really a way to keep these clones, who don't know that they're clones, isolated from human society, protected and healthy, because they're ultimately going to serve as um, bodies from which organs are going to be harvested until those people die, usually in their 30s. Kathy is what is called a caregiver, and so she is tasked with taking care of these these classmates of hers who are going to go first, effectively as donors. So part of the way that Ishiguro tells the story is through flipping back and forth between memories. So Kathy's telling you the story, and she says, "Well, actually, you know what? I need to tell you about something before I get to this part of the story," and it goes back and forth. This is very irritating for some people, partially because they've never read Ishiguro, but partially because I think if they get memory flashbacks, they want it to be very directed and specific. An example of this I could think of would be Greta Gerwig's adaptation of Little Women, in which we see a different color palette when Gerwig switches between memories, and then a direct difference. This is what happened in this version, and here's what happened this time. And that's not how Ishiguro writes. Ishiguro is giving you, I think about it more as a mosaic. He's giving you lots of bits of information, and then it's up to you to then arrange that into something that makes sense for you. But it's not going to be so obvious that, oh, when I have this memory flashback, it's going to be poignantly um, put against this other memory that I just alluded to. That's not how Ishiguro writes. It's languorous, it's slow. He takes his time with things, and if that irritates you, you may not like Ishiguro, but it's something that I really like about him as a writer. Now, it doesn't mean that I love this novel the way that I found so many reviewers did. They rate this as his best novel ever, as I've alluded to before, back there on the shelf. Remains of the Day is my favorite novel of his, but I'm always effectively chasing that novel, and so all of his novels I sort of set up against that standard. That's my own problem, whether that's a good practice or not, but I'm still able to look at these novels and say whether I like them or not, even if they're not in the manner of Remains of the Day and the way that I like it. The reason I like that novel. So, what's happening at a very superficial level is childhood, boarding school, friendships. For those of you who haven't been to boarding school, it's a very favorite memory of mine. All of my sisters went to boarding school as well. We all have very good memories of boarding school. We understand that other people don't have good memories of boarding school, and parents sometimes don't have good memories of boarding school because their children are away from them. And when those children come back, they've become independent by the process of being sent to boarding school. When you're 14 years old, as I was, and you're surrounded by older guys, you aspire to be cool in their eyes, accepted, and part of that means you have to act in a more adult manner, and you're forced to do so anyway. You have to do your own homework, you have to do your own laundry. You know, your parents aren't there to help you, your parents aren't there to help you process social interactions or difficulties. You've got to do that on your own. And so there's some of that going on at that level, and that plays out later on in these relationships between each other. But there's also that caregiving element that bridges what is going on at school with what happens later in life. And Kathy, as this caregiver, that means that she's there to accompany these other clones as they go through the donation process. Usually they talk about having 3 or 4 donations, and then that's it. You're going to pass away because you've given up all your organs to these other people. And we've seen this idea explored, I think, in a Michael Bay movie called The Island, in which people are effectively grown, cultivated in an isolated area so that they can serve effectively just as parts for other human beings. this is a horrific idea. But it seems that the society that Ishiguro puts together for us has accepted this, and there's a meta narrative living above the the level of the participants, which is, are we actually considering what's going on in our life, or are we simply putting one step in front of another and we're not thinking about what the end is? And so as the society just accepts what's easy, oh look at, we get all these organs and we have these clones and maybe they don't have souls, and so we don't have to worry about that. And so in the same level as a society, are we really engaged with the big questions that matter about who we are as humans, what we're doing as a society, what's the end game, where are we going, etc. So those storylines are operating, and again, Ishiguro is doing this through a vehicle of a difficult moral question, this question of cloning. Maybe not so difficult for other people, but it seems certainly for our society, it seems to be at least a conflict, a situation that forces a lot of conflict. But I think they are forced, the donors, the clones, are forced to examine their life more closely than the humans who live outside of their existence, who are just accepting their body parts as necessary. There's and they are sterilized. They are not able to reproduce. So we have some relation to the replicants from Blade Runner. What kind of society creates extras which we can just harvest? A very cold society, a society that doesn't think of our fellow human beings as brothers and sisters, if not in a humanity, or let's say within a religion. For Christians, we tend to think of people as in relating to common humanity in relation to a savior. And so if you don't have some kind of thread, you can treat people disposably. Or as I've alluded to in other videos on this channel, if you don't consider people human, you can massacre them and say that it's because of some sort of divine intention that you're allowed to do that. This is all to say, it's not a very long novel. You can see just in this edition, it's not even 300 pages. Ishiguro doesn't tend to go over long in his novels. In fact, sometimes some might say it's a little shorter. I have not seen the film adaptation. I may in the future, and then I may do a film club on it. Just have to see. But in any case, I think that the novel asks some important questions, and as any Ishiguro novel does, it does it in a way that is easy to read, I think, without being everybody's cup of tea. So just because something is easy to read and because it talks about something important doesn't mean that it's a novel you'll like, and that's okay. I think that's something that I want to stress. When people read novels, I something that Neil Gaiman said at a conference, a writers' conference I went to many years ago, that you have to think about, as a writer and as a reader, the idea of fertilizer. That if you are composting something, if you're unfamiliar with the process of compost, you take organic matter and you put it into a pile, and over time it turns into soil. But you don't really care about what you put into that compost pile. In case it could be eggs, it could be leaves, it could be whatever, but over time it's all going to turn into soil. And his idea was, you've got to read a lot of different things, and it's not always going to be of the same quality. But over time, that will work its way into a soil that helps you with your reading and your writing in the future. And I very much believe that. So I don't have to love every novel I write. And I've learned even on this channel, I don't have to love every work that I'm recommending, film or book-wise. But I do feel if I'm talking about on the channel, it's something that I think would be worth at least investigating, or at least worth reading. So even though it's not my favorite Ishiguro novel, despite what many people say, even though other people may not like it, I still think it would be worth your time investigating. If not this Ishiguro novel, any Ishiguro novel. I think he's one of the finest novelists of our era who's still alive. If you'd like to support this work, our work here in the channel, you can buy a copy of the book. There's a link in the description. You could also become a YouTube member or a Patreon member. That's one way you can support the channel on an ongoing basis. You'll get access to reviews like this early. And in 2025, I'll also be doing private live streams, answering questions, talking about different books that I'm not necessarily reviewing, but just chatting with members about. If you just like this one and you wanted to recognize that, you can send a super thanks through YouTube, or you can use Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. Those are in the links below. And as a reminder, in 2024, a portion of the revenues from all these different streams will go towards the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which helps children who could not otherwise get medical care in Gaza and other parts of Palestine that medical care that they need. They're a great organization. Please feel free to visit them and give them money directly, or if you'd like to give them money indirectly through supporting the channel, please feel free to do so. And in 2025, if you'd like to nominate a book, my Amazon wish list is there. If you buy that book for me and send it to me, I will probably review it. If it's on my wish list, there's a reason it's there. And that's one way to get a book to the front of the line that you're really interested in. Until next time, enjoy your reading.